Alex,
Yes, sir.
I got to see the miracle of life the other day.
Yeah, me too.
Okay,
Well,
but
oh, okay,
but
okay,
I
but
saw
how?
birds.
Yeah, yeah. You saw birds. I was just practicing for EMT class that I'm taking.
That's not where I thought we were going.
No, no, no. This is this is a
Anyway,
wild start.
yeah, I was leaving my buddy's house. I just got done DJing, and I walk out the door, and there's these two hawks. They were on somebody's roof, and then they just fly over this tree right in front of me, and just going
What wild?
ham,
We're doing.
going ham. And then got my phone out to take a picture, send Alex, and then of course they get off and fly away. But it's a true story. It happened.
Yeah, pretty neat.
But welcome everybody to Life the Complete Story. I feel like it's been a minute, but it hasn't. And we're here for another episode. Today we're talking about the Characiformes. But first, make sure you follow us on Spotify, subscribe to the page on YouTube, like us on Facebook at Life the Complete Story. On those three platforms, find us on TikTok and Instagram at Life Complete Story. We post reels and other interesting facts on amazing species on those two pages. And send us an email at lifecompletstory@gmail.com. If you have anything you want us to learn, want us to go over, anything you found interesting, just talk to us. We like to talk to you guys, but talking works both ways.
Yeah.
And we will start how we always do, Alex, with
Yes,
our
sir.
nature in the news.
Yes. So this week's Nature in the News. The article is a doozy. It comes from National Geographic, and it is that bird science has a bro bias. Is a great name. So what it boils down to is most research that has been done for birds and the whole class of aves, class of aves, right? Yes. Cool.
Yes,
Look at I say I paid
it's still a
attention.
class.
I paid attention in zoology. Is that most of the research has been done pretty heavily for the males of pretty much any species of bird. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the males are much easier to identify and just see in general. Think of something like the northern cardinal, the bird we see a lot around us here in North America. Males are that very bright, vibrant red, very easy to pick out, easy to spot. But the females are just kind of like a dull, kind of tan color with a little fleck of red, like on the
Yeah,
ends of the
and they're like
feathers.
tufts.
So it's something that since it's so much easier to see them and identify them, they're easier to research, and that's why it's kind of an unconscious bias. Really, it's not. It's one of those like
Yeah, it's
just
not on purpose.
just because it's easier they're easier to see,
Yeah,
easier to identify.
ooh,
But
shiny, let me follow.
yeah, but when you get species that are pretty similar, things like crows, a lot of the birds of prey, that they all look very similar, you don't see that difference as much. But as far as when you're looking at things like migration patterns or feeding patterns, but at the same time, if you're trying to specifically study males versus females, that makes it a lot harder, whereas those other species is much easier.
Yeah. One of the prime species they used in the study is the golden-winged warbler. Not only do the females and the males differ in color and pigmentation, everything like that, the females typically inhabit a lower elevation than the males. So think of it like a hard line, not a hard line, but there's a soft line between where the males and the females inhabit. And as breeding season intermixes, that line kind of disappears and stuff. But you won't see females outside of breeding season in the male area, and you won't see males in the outside of breeding season in the female area.
And the problem with that for those golden wing warblers, especially since the females live at those lower elevations, they are at much higher risk for that loss of the non-breeding season habitat. And that's in the article that they were looking at from that research. In a span of 16 years, the females lost twice as much non-breeding habitat as the males. So that's where getting away from those biases and looking at that really is important. The one researcher said that they were surprised to see that the females actually disperse a lot more than the males do, but that also means that those females tend to have a lower survival rate, and that's a lot of other studies are seeing that as well. And some of that has to do with the females flying farther than the males when they migrate, so they have more time for predators they're seen more by predators, they use more energy, and because of that they are at a higher risk of starving before they reach their destination.
Right. And that's not something we can handle. Like it's not our fault that the females decide, oh, I'm gonna fly this pattern instead of a little bit tighter or whatever. It's that's on them, and that we're just trying our best to like research that and minimize our effect on them. But that's gonna wrap up our article for today. Once again, that was Bird Science Has a Bro Bias, published in National Geographic on March 18th by Jason Battelle.
Very
So
interesting.
yeah, we'll move on into our lesson now. Today, as I said, we're talking Characiformes. Characiformes. These guys are grouped in that same order, the same super order as carp, catfish, and the knife fish. There's 18 families and 270 genera, with at least 1,600 species in this one uh, order. So,
A lot.
yeah, the
There you go.
belief, awesome. That's
Yeah.
actually pretty good.
Yeah. Pretty high quality image.
You see the piranha, you see like a pike
I say, I
Characiform.
don't, is that a pike or is it like a walleye? No, it's not a walleye. I don't know what.
It's a pike Characiform. They're their own little mini family here.
Okay.
So
Just
the or
representative species here for
yeah,
you
representative
guys.
species originally from Gondwana, West Gondwana, which is now South America and Africa, which is where you'll see most of these species come from. Some have like kind of finangled on over into like Central America, even like South or South North America. But for the most part, we're looking in South America and Africa, that Amazon River basin, as well as the west. The what's the western river? The Niger River.
Yes.
Yeah, in Africa. Because of that, you can kind of see there's a lot of similarities between some of the species on each of these continents, but there's also a lot of differences from where they kind of fill out in the food chain. These guys had that Weberian apparatus we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks now, that system where the eardrum connects to the swim bladder and gives a better auditory system. Some species superficially resemble carp, but they possess an adipose fin between their dorsal and tail fins. So as you can kind of see in species B and C in Alex's chart are the best examples to really look at. They have that little nubbin of a fin between their top dorsal fin and their tail fin. A lot of these species have teeth in a non-protractile mouth, which means the mouth, like in a shark, how the mouth extends out whenever it's feeding. These guys just open and close. There's no real jaw. There's no pushing of the jaws out to capture prey. And most of them are carnivores. There are a couple that are detritivores or even herbivores, but most have some type of meat in their diet, whether it's invertebrates or other fish. These guys also have well-defined scales. You can really see it in a lot of these species that Alex has. Even in the smaller images down at the bottom, like image J, you can really see the scales made out between them. Even E, I'm not sure exactly what the species are off the top of my head, but you can see the well-defined scales. As I said already, most modern species are found in South and Central America, but there are a couple hundred found in Africa, and we're going to get into those today as we cover our families within the order.
Yes, sir.
So
So
go ahead.
I'll start with this first family here. I think I have a picture that I pulled up here. Bingo. There we go. So this is it's a order, correct?
Yeah. No. Family.
Genus. Family.
Family.
So we're switching it up a little bit. So this is the family Disticontidae. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is an African family of the Characiformes. They kind of split into two groups. There's one group is more herbivorous, and the other one they're considered micropredators, which means they are more omnivorous, maybe even slightly a little more carnivorous. But the herbivores, while they primarily eat plants, they tend to be omnivorous, so they'll eat kind of both. And then the ones that, like you said, those micro predators, they're more carnivorous. They tend to be split into two groups further. Some are fish eaters, which means they eat smaller fish, and some are fin eaters, which means that they bite off the scales or pieces of fins of larger fish for food, that instead of eating those fish themselves. So they're a little less impactful, and I'm sure they tend to be on the smaller side. But these fish vary in size from about 8 centimeters all the way up to 83 centimeters, so they can get fairly large. That's almost a meter long.
Yeah, that's 3 inches to about 30 inches.
Yeah. So they get to be some pretty decent sized fish.
There are 17 genera for these guys, and about 90 species. The genus, we're probably just gonna skip over them today. There's a lot of genus to cover throughout these groups.
As we said, almost 17.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the next family.
Yeah, we would be here all day. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm sure you guys would love it, but maybe not that much. You get tired of
Yep.
hearing us talk. That's for
So
sure.
our next genus for today, our next family for today, is Chitharinidae. These guys are the lutefish. They're a small family. They're also native to the freshwaters of Africa, and they are treated as a heavy food fish. As you can see in the picture that Alex put up, that's a thick boy. He probably feeds a whole family.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
And these guys can grow up to nearly 3 feet and 40 pounds. And these guys have 3 genera with 8 species within those 3 genera. Moving on, we'll move on into Alex. What do we got next?
Next, we have Cranuchidae is the next group we're looking at. These are the South American darters. So as you see, they're much smaller fish, much more slender and elongated. There are 115 species between 11 genera. And as I said, they're relatively small, with the majority of them being under 4 inches long. So pretty small. And they originate in Panama and then in South America. So primarily South America, with a little bit into Central America where that connects to South America.
Yeah, these guys are really small guys, kind of fast for their size, but you could tell based off their long pectoral fins they have. Moving on, we'll move into the next family, Hepatidae. These guys are the African pikes. Now they're not true pikes, like how we have it here in America. They're more elongated Characiformes. So it's one genus with 6 species, and they are found throughout West and Central America. Now, West and Central Africa.
There you go.
Most often, they're found in like the Kafu River, is where the Hepsestus cuviaria is found. That's the South African pike for those that aren't quite up to date on their scientific names. We'll move on to our next set. Alex, what do we have?
Next up, we have the group. It is Lestidae. These are the African tetras. They are found exclusively in Africa, so they're different. They're not. I don't think they're quite the same as you'd see like tetras at the pet store. But there are 120 species and 18 genera. Most notable are the Congro tetra and the African tigerfish. So they kind of vary in size. They're a bit larger than, I believe, the tetra you see at the store are more of the South American tetra, I
Yeah,
believe. I'm not sure. Okay.
they're both pretty colorful. There's just a lot more South American variety.
Okay. But yeah, you can see some of the ones I put up here. They're quite colorful. As if you've ever seen them in the pet store, they tend to be quite colorful. These ones are very reflective, kind of almost rainbowy in color.
So, yeah, and these guys also house the tigerfish, which are much larger than like a tetra you'd see at the pet store. They're also very carnivorous and have very large conical teeth. But anything else to add on this group, Alex?
I do not know. We didn't have a whole lot in our notes for these guys,
And
which is fine.
there's not a whole lot in general for these guys, for this entire group, but there's just a lot of group to cover. So we'll move on into Erythrinidae next. These guys are the wolf fish. These guys are found from Costa Rica to Argentina in South America. They are a fairly common sight to see when you're on like a hook and line when you're fishing, and they can reach up to lengths of 3 feet, and they're able to air breathe, similar to some of the more primitive fish species we talked about, like the arapaima and things like that. Although I don't think it's through the same like mechanisms. Those guys had a set like their swim bladder was adapted to that. I think these guys are just better adapted for it,
Okay.
to my knowledge. And that'll move us on into our next group.
Yes, so our next group is the Characiformes. These are one that many people may be pretty familiar with. This is where the piranha comes from. So there's 90 species in 16 genera. The scientific name I read, Characiformes, translates to the serrated salmon family. It refers to the serrations on the belly of the fish, which is kind of hard to see on this image I pulled up, but they'll have I think it's probably some of those bottom fins that are a bit bumpy, almost like a serrated knife. It includes, like I said, the piranha, the pacu, as well as the silver dollar fish. And the diets range quite a bit from fruits and seeds to invertebrates, as well as fish fins, scales, or in the case of the piranha, pretty much anything with enough meat on it for them to go after. And then many of them are highly demanded in aquaculture, such as the pacu. Uh, a lot of species of pacu are quite important in many fisheries.
Right. That'll move us on into our next grouping, where we will be talking about Kynodontidae. And I was really confused when I did the research on this group because a Kynodont is like the ancestor to all mammals. It's like a little mouse dog looking thing. So I was
Okay.
really confused on why we got this as a fish. And then I read why it's called the Kynodontidae. They're called the dog tooth Characians based off of how their teeth are developed. So they have well developed canines, which they use to spear their prey.
Yes, and some of the pictures I can see if I can find, and I'll pull up a picture that's a real good picture. There you go. You can see the teeth.
Yeah, they got some real nice chompers there. We got 5 genera, 14 species found in South America. Although most of what we know of these guys as a whole group is based off the one subfamily, Kynodontidae, and they like to live in like the mid-level area of rivers, lakes, and flooded forests. Flooded forests are a common sight in South America, oftentimes during the rainy season. The Amazon will flood over into those riparian zones we've talked about a couple weeks ago now at this point. And these guys are found in the Orinoco and Amazon river basins, but can also be found in the Guianas and their rivers. And even some species can be found as far south as Uruguay. That'll lead us on into Alex. What do we have next?
Next up, we have Hemiodontidae. Sorry, I was trying to look ahead. I think there we go. An image for them. These are the half-tooths. So it's a small family found in northern South America to the Paraguay basin. They have very streamlined bodies that allow for them to swim quickly, very swiftly, and they can even leap out of the water. They really don't have much teeth. Most of them possess no teeth on the lower jaws, except for a single species, and that is M. sugulatus. And most of them also possess a spot on the side of the body that you can see in the image here, and a stripe that extends to the caudal fin. This one doesn't look like it has the stripe, and it kind of does. You can see from that kind of darker line from the gill plate, it ends just about where that spot is. There are 29 species in 5 genera in this group.
That'll move us on into Periodontidae. These guys are a benthic species found in the mountain streams of Panama and South America. These guys kind of resemble the suckers we talked about a couple weeks ago when we talked about carp and their relatives. There's 3 genera, including 32 species. However, most are like undescribed, not well researched. They're known as the scrape tooths because how they feed, they'll scrape the algae and other benthic material off like rocks and things like that. Uh, and it used to be a subfamily of the half teeth or the half tooths.
Nice. So then from there, I will take us to our next group. That is the Prochilodontidae. Got one right here. They're pretty cool looking. These are the flannel mouth characins, found in the northern half of South America, but as far down as Paraguay and northern Argentina. They have fleshy lips with rows of small teeth. So you can see in the picture there, they kind of have a very flat, wide mouth. It allows the lips actually to extend into kind of a sucking disc. They can get fairly large. They can grow up to about 2.5 feet. And they typically live in large schools, which makes them popular as food fish.
Yeah. Moving on, we'll move on into our Chilodontidae. These guys are the headstanders. I'm really hoping Alex can find me a picture
Yeah, I
of a
gotcha.
headstander.
Oh, yeah, I got you. Good picture. There you go.
Perfect. So these guys are kind of unique because they like to assume the posture of like a downward dog, where they stare at the dirt. They have a lot of colorful markings, which makes them very popular aquarium fish. They're also small, which helps for that a lot. They don't get bigger than 7 centimeters, which is what, 3 inches.
Yeah, it's not very long. Yeah, about 2.5 to 3 inches.
As I said, they are distinguished by that head down posture, downward dog, head down, whatever you want to call it. And there are two genera within that house 8 species within them.
Nice. Our next to last group for today is the Curamatidae. These are the toothless characins found from Costa Rica to Argentina. There are 105 species in this group that are found in 8 genera, also oftentimes exploited as a food fish, and they lack jaw teeth, but they do possess some pharyngeal plates because they tend to eat a lot of algae and detritus, kind of smaller things that they don't really need teeth for. But those pharyngeal plates allow them to grind that up and digest it a little better. Take us to our last group for today.
So our last group for today is going to be Anostomidae, and these guys they're called the mouth on top, oftentimes because their mouth have like a further extended keel, and their mouth like sits on top of it.
Let's see if I can find most of the pictures I'm finding. Here's one that may kind of show that a little better.
But
Really
these guys
thin.
are found in the freshwater habitats.
There you go. You can see that one. It's kind of up a little more.
Yeah, a little bit higher up on the face snout region. These guys are found from the Rio Atrato in northernmost South America, all the way down to the warm central Argentina waters. Oftentimes found in the Amazon, although a few are found west of the Andes Mountains.
Okay.
So they have an elongated body shape, as you can see, from about 15 to 60 centimeters, so about 6 to 24 inches, so half a foot to 2 feet. And some of them have that more spindle-like body, while others are like deeper bodied, kind of thicker, stouter. They have an elongated, tapered head, and they have straight snouts. And that's going to cover it for today's lesson. Kind of a lightning round of a lesson, but if I'm going to be honest with you guys, we're going to break the fourth wall for a second. We're recording a separate second episode after this, so we're kind of trying to smush them together.
Yes. And for these guys, as we said, a lot of similarities as there are in many when you start looking at families, but as you work your way down, there are some specifics like we talked about today. So we don't want to get too crazy with them. And also we don't want to bore you guys with reading out 1,700 different species.
But we're not done yet.
Of course not.
We still have a lot of other things to talk about today.
Yes, we do.
Alex, why don't you take it with your most wanted?
Yes, let me pull up my image here. So my most wanted for today is the Pyrrhactis brachypomus, also known as the red-bellied pacu or Pyrrhapitinga, which is a very large species in the pacu group of fish. Get a little more centered. So they're, of course, as I said, part of the Characiformes family, close relatives of the piranhas and silver dollars, native to that Amazon basin in tropical South America. But they were widely farmed and introduced to a lot of other regions, but now in South Florida, they have become invasive as they escaped that aquaculture and into the rivers, canals, and lakes in those areas of South Florida where it's still fairly warm, similar to some of that Amazon basin area that they live in, they're native to in South America. Um, they referred to that red-bellied pacu because of the juveniles have the red bellies to similar to some of the piranhas. But as you can see, as you get to the adults, they tend to be much darker in appearance. The big difference between these and the piranha are actually the teeth, which the red belly pacu that I have here, the teeth tend to be a bit more molar like, whereas the piranha have more pointy carnivorous style teeth. But they feed on pretty much everything: fruits, seeds, nuts, zooplankton, insects, crustaceans, and other small fish, especially in drier periods where there's not as much vegetation. And that's why that molar teeth tends to they prefer more of the plant matter. Those molar teeth allow them to grind it up a little bit, but actually allows the red-bellied pacu in some cases with the seeds to pass through the body without being digested. So they're actually quite prolific seed dispersers. So in some ways they're actually a good thing for the environment. But when, of course, they're an area like South Florida where they really don't have a lot of predators, and as you can see, they get quite large. I don't have a number for. Oh, here you go. They can get up to 88 centimeters, which is about almost 3 feet long, and 25 kilograms or 55 pounds. So they can get pretty decently large. And in some of those areas in the fresh waters of South Florida, really the only predator they would have would be the large carnivores like the American alligator and American crocodile. Outside of that, most of your other prey or predator fish are not big enough to even come close to touching these guys, which is why they are able to be invasive. And because they are so large, they're pretty heavy. Um, it'd be hard for them to even get to them anyway. But that is about all I have on these guys. Like I said, they're very opportunistic, and they also migrate, which is why they become a problem in some of those rivers. And even the juveniles can be found in like whitewater rivers, so they can survive pretty much anywhere, nutrient rich or poor. So it allows them to spread pretty readily, and without good predators, they filled in quite fast.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex, for that little invasive species on the pacu. Interesting thing. We're gonna be talking about a different species of pacu for the amazing species. This is the Mylius pacu with the common name of just the pacu. Don't know why, but these guys are listed as a near threatened, so not doing too bad for themselves. However, there is a lot of population fragmentation, it would appear, in their natural range.
I'll pull up the map here for the folks to see at home.
Yeah, they live mostly in Guyana. Some stretch out into Venezuela, but the Essequibo River in Guyana and the Demerara River basin is also present in the Cuyuni River in Venezuela. But these guys are decreasing, and there's a continuing decline of mature individuals. But the population is thought to be decreasing because of habitat loss due to the gold mining within this area, and the fishing pressure has increased by 25% over the past 10 years.
Because as you can see in the image I have pulled up, they're quite large, so I'm sure they're pretty good
They're
food
large,
fish.
but they're not as large as your pacu.
Okay.
They're only about a foot long. Here, I got some pictures here.
Yeah. Hold on. There you go. You have some other pictures, but as Tyler was saying, a lot of that.
On
There you
fish
go.
base.
Yeah.
Hand for reference.
Yeah. So a little smaller than the pacu I had pulled up. But as Tyler said, a lot of that mining and quarrying, as well as your typical domestic and urban wastewater pollution, industrial, military, and agriculture effluents that make its way into the water, causes all kinds of quality issues.
Yes. Usual culprits, as Alex and I are saying, as you said, like mining effluent and stuff, a lot of overfishing and harvesting. Uh, it is a pet internationally, as for aquarium food trade, and as well as a food fish internationally, uh, or really just international, national, and local levels. And there is no in place research or monitoring. However, there are conservation sites throughout its entire range, and it does occur in some of these protected areas. But other than that, there's not really much else to add on the Mileus Pacu.
Unfortunately, being in a couple of very, I don't want to say third world countries, but countries that
Developing. Yeah.
don't care as much about conservation as many others.
Right. So that's gonna cover my amazing species. Alex, we'll tag team this last little sec.
Yes,
As
sir.
always, it's our ecology encyclopedia where we take a term that we either have covered and just didn't go super in depth about, or something that we're going to cover, and it's gonna come up again and again and again and again. So
Yes.
today we're talking about, is today eutrophication?
Yeah.
It is. Today we're talking about eutrophication. For those of you that don't know, eutrophication is basically the overaccumulation of nutrients in a water ecosystem.
Pull up a nice picture for this. Bingo.
Yep.
Yeah. So, kind of what eutrophication is. It happens a lot when we talk, especially when we reference things like nutrient pollution, like fertilizer runoff causing algal blooms. This is really the big problem with eutrophication because it's typically in very slow or stagnant warm water habitats. So, like lakes, ponds, especially like small ponds where there's really nowhere for the water to go, um, or some very slow moving rivers and canals. Especially, you're going to see this, especially if they're kind of abandoned, but the canal is still there, has water in it. It can be both man-made or it can be naturally occurring as well over time as these bodies of water kind of fill in from the edges as those shore or near shore plants die and decay over time. It does build up kind of a soil layer, and that eventually moves closer to the center and fills in. So actually up at the camp that my family has in northern Pennsylvania, there's a pond nearby that I've noticed has been doing that over time. Just compared to when I was a little kid to now, is probably lost about 2 or 3 feet of the bank because there's a lot of things like lily pads that have grown and died every year and has started to fill it in. But with this, you tend to see, like with many of the algal blooms, you get a lot of dissolved oxygen depletion, and that pretty much kills everything within the water, fish, invertebrates. It makes it pretty difficult for things that are like amphibians that can live outside of the water, but when you have such nutrient poor water and these algal blooms, a lot of times will also release toxins which absorb through the skin of the amphibians, makes it difficult for anything to live besides the algae and plankton that are able to survive or are causing the blooms.
Right. So the eutrophication, put in the simplest terms, is there is an overabundance of nutrients in the water, which causes plankton and algae to overconsume, producing an excess amount of carbon dioxide or just depleting the oxygen resources in the water to begin with, because there's not a lot of movement to produce oxygen, because that's one of the major ways for waterways to get oxygen within themselves is for there to be movement and ripples and things like that is what oxygenates your water. And that gets to a point where the nutrients cause so outweigh the oxygen that nothing can survive in the simplest terms.
Yeah. And some of the things I'm seeing a little lower down in our notes here, there's some research conducted in the 70s at the Experimental Lakes area in Ontario, Canada, which showed that typically these freshwater bodies of water are limited by phosphorus, which is a key nutrient for a lot of plant growth, as well as nitrogen and potassium. Yeah. Yes, potassium. NPK. So that that limitation on that specific chemical, phosphorus, is what prevents the plants from pretty much outgrowing the ecosystem. But when you introduce things like sewage water or fertilizer runoff, and it now has an abundance of phosphorus, it just runs rampant.
Yeah, fertilizer runoff is one of the best examples because you're fertilizing plants on the land, which also need that phosphorus. So the excess phosphorus just goes straight into the water. But this also happens with other things like detergents, which you don't think of have nutrients. But it's still a chemical compound that uses a phosphorus as more of a cleaning agent than a nutrient agent. So a lot of detergents used to have like sodium triphosphate, and as that breaks down, the phosphorus, the phosphate opens up, and the phosphorus is able to be consumed by uh, the plankton and things like that.
Yeah, and when we say phosphorus, most of the plant organisms don't use just pure phosphorus. It's usually in that form of a phosphate, which you can find in a lot of things. Like Tyler said, that the old detergents, that triphosphate would break up into just its kind of constituent phosphates, and it's readily available for use for the plants.
Right. So that's going to do it for today's episode, everybody. Once again, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the page on YouTube at Life the Complete Story. Follow us on Spotify at Life the Complete Story. Follow us on Facebook at Life the Complete Story. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Life Complete Story. And send us an email at lifecompletestory@gmail.com. You know, there's a lot of other things that happen for us outside of the podcast, and those are the places where you can find it. I know I've been talking about it for the past 30 some episodes, and I'm going to put more than just the podcast up on YouTube, and I will. But you have to like sit down and do something.
Yeah, we have to figure out some videos to make.
Yes, but they will happen eventually. I hope everyone enjoyed. As we always say, Alex,
Keep on learning, learn something new. You never know what you'll find interesting.
here we go.
Yes,
We'll see you guys
sir.
next week.
Yep. Have a good one, everyone.